Everyone considers risk when they invest, but most people rely on recent experience to guide them, and this is often a big mistake. Today I'm going to talk about 3 areas with examples of mistakes that people make by relying on recent events. The first one is the danger of making big bets. The second is known risks that have been forgotten about, and the third is hidden risks within a portfolio. The temptation to take big bets in a portfolio is something I see all the time. Based on history, it's quite often that people can conclude that something is almost certain to happen. And if you feel that way, why would you want to have lots of wishy-washy investments when you can have one high conviction position? It is nearly always a mistake because it misunderstands the nature of risk and what we know and what we don't know. So if you think about the price of any asset, it will be set based on what we know today. So all of the risks that are occurring today will tend to be in the price. What makes prices move is things that we aren't aware of. So if we think back in recent history, there are 2 things that happened recently which made people think that led people to believe there might be inflation, but actually turned out to be completely incorrect, and that we can rationalize that now, but it wasn't obvious at the time. The first was the entry of China and 1 billion people to the world trade system. It was a huge labor shock, and it led to 20 to 30 years of disinflationary pressures. The second one was QE, massive money printing. People were convinced it was inflationary, but inflation never appeared because, as we know now, it was neutralized within the banking system. Now, those things are obvious today, but weren't obvious at the time. And it's a classic example of what we know and what we don't know. So all big bets are based on the fallacy that we know what's going to happen, and we never do. So having a range of things is nearly always better. The second factor I want to talk about is the importance of what risks which may seem old-fashioned or out of date. So if we think about what's happened recently, we can forget about risks that actually are always present. Things like inflation, risk of currency moves, or perhaps economic crisis in one area of the world. So these things may not have occurred recently, leading people to be complacent, but they're always a risk, and it's very important that you try and cover off these risks within your portfolio to make sure you have a robust portfolio. The last thing is hidden risks. So the example I want to give you is interest rate sensitivity. Lots of investments are actually sensitive to interest rate changes. With interest rates going up, the price of investments goes down, and many people aren't aware of it. So if you think about bonds is an obvious example of an investment where as the higher interest rates go, the lower the price of the bond, which of course means as a bond investor you lose money. But actually there are lots of investments on the equity side which have the same characteristics. Things like property, infrastructure, utilities. Now, an investor that was basing their decisions on what had happened in the recent history would have looked at these kind of investments and thought that they look great, low risk, high returns, what's not to like. But actually you end up loading up behind a single risk and making your portfolio completely unnecessarily brittle and low quality. So I would recommend that people are always aware of the hidden risks in a portfolio, whether it's interest rates, currency, or the risk of an economic crisis in one area of the world. I must remind you, I've been talking about investing today, so your capital is at risk. If you like the video and you'd like to automatically receive them, click on the flying colours icon and you'll be added to the list. It would be great if you could like the video. And if anyone has any questions, you can always get in contact with me by phone or email, and I'd be delighted to respond to any queries that you have.